Switching over. Namaste. Inviting connection at third eye. We'd like everyone who's present here to gently place attention at the etheric crystal at the third eye with the intention of meeting and receiving my energy there. And to feel that you are entrusting your attention to be gently held by the crystal and resting in this trust. And having done this, to go into first gear, deep, slow, and full Yaha breathing. And to do 20 breath cycles of one inhale and one exhale, this way to deepen our connection with each other. Continuing to breathe. What I'd like to do is to go from this foundation of first gear Yaha breathing and feeling the arching and flattening that creates the spinal wave, and to gently become sensitive to your spine and how it's waving, and to invite relaxation of any place where the energy seems stuck in the spine. Focusing attention on the vertebra closest to that stuck energy, and to feel that joint arching and flattening along with the spinal wave, to invite it back into movement. And would like to affirm that in our language, it is called the principle of Va. Va is the word for movement, and it means a movement that is sacred. And it's also a word for growth, because all sacred movement has growth. It's not merely change for the sake of change, but change that's always growing, developing, and enriching itself. And indeed, everything in the universe has this quality, that it's changing, enriching itself, which means that in the endless expansion of this universe, there is no repetition. There are cycles that do repeat in a certain way, but every cycle carries change with it. And the repeating patterns, called cycles, is the background that makes change more visible. And also it makes change more manageable as well. So there is a subtle constant that's in the background of the change. And both are necessary for life to be meaningful. And part of meditation is to find balance between the part that endures and is eternal, and the part that is always in change. If we focus too much on the part that's always changing, then we feel anxious inside and not safe in the world. And if we focus, in a sense, too much on the eternal, we lose touch with our growth edge, the place where meaningful change is happening. And between the change of time and the constancy of eternity is something that not all the languages of your world have a term for. In the ancient Greek world, they called it kairos, which is sometimes called being time, or the time of growth, the time of a flower blooming and opening up. Growth is what mediates eternity and time and makes both the processes meaningful. For everything to be always as it is not a very meaningful life, as well as things changing without any center or root to them. And so growth is what redeems time and brings it into the field of eternity. And when you breathe, you participate in this. That is why we move from the constancy of our eternal awareness to the breath of space, which inhabits the changing body and renews the body through its unity between time and eternity. It is a deep theme that may seem a little abstract at this time in your life, but I would like for you to keep these thoughts in mind as you do the practice, because in the process of healing everything, the most important thing is to never get stuck anywhere, to keep your process fluid. And when we form attachments and cling to things, we make our process get stuck there. And grieving is a way of removing those stuck places, moving them again. And so if you don't know how to handle a certain pain, the simplicity of what I recommend that you do is to consciously breathe and fully embrace whatever you're feeling. What you feel, if you remove resistance and clinging from that, and also remove identification from that, it will constantly change until it dissolves into peace and becomes part of our peace. And this way our emotional life keeps enriching who and what we are. We grow from every experience we have. And when our experience of enlightenment is a result of a movement of growth, it means that it remains once it arrives. It may continue to undergo change and deepen and enrich itself, but it will continue to remain. Continuing to breathe. I'd like you to see if you can notice how when you're breathing consciously that you're never really stuck anywhere, or if there is a stuck or frozen place, that frozen energy is melting with each breath. It becomes part of the ocean again. Continuing to breathe. Continuing to breathe. And what I'd like to do next is to, as a basis for some deeper meditations soon to come in our process with each other, I'd like you to feel the difference between breath of space, breath of air, breath of fire, breath of water, and breath of earth. And there are many forms of all of these, just like there's many kinds of earth and many kinds of water. Some water is slow and meandering, and some is very fast. Some is like a waterfall, and some is like a storm. And so each one of these categories of breathing is very large in itself. And there are some of the meditators in your world who will take time to master just one of these breaths and can go very far with that mastery. And when each of these breaths is mastered, it becomes integrated into breath of space. And breath of space is the breath that we are. Breath of space is pure awareness. And that is a deep connection to make. And so, breath of space is where we become conscious of our breathing, but we do not control the breath in any way. And there's the reason why we do not control the breath is we do not control ourselves. If in order to control ourselves, we have to split ourselves into two, the controller and the controlled. And when we are in unity and resting in what we are, there is no split, no dualistic struggle inside. We are simply resting in being and being present for the processes. And we become like what in chemistry is called a catalyst. A catalyst is something that profoundly affects the world around it, and yet is unaffected by the reactions. It is what allows reactions to happen, but doesn't get caught in the reaction itself. Catalysts are very important for the process of liberation, because they are the places where new energy comes into the system and does not get depleted. It is the eternal manifesting in time. In terms of the teachings of Gurdjieff, the one who brought the fourth way transmissions into conscious awareness of this world, he talks about catalysts as the carbons that where the oxygens, hydrogens, and nitrogens interact with each other, and the carbons are the mediating force in the process. The hydrogens being the neutral gear that can become all the other gears, and the carbons, oxygens, and nitrogens forming the triads of the three forces in balance. The carbons being the higher energy that catalyzes the interactions between the passive force of the nitrogens with the active force of the oxygens. In terms of the breath, the active force is breath of fire. And in breath of fire, the exhale is a little more aggressive. The inhale is a little more passive, and the exhale is aggressive. You inhale, receive, and you exhale with a vigorous ha sound, and it's done fairly rapidly, with the belly acting like a bellows. And the metaphor is that you use a bellows to make the fire stronger and hotter. So I'd like you to do 20 breaths of fire, and that is the third gear of what we've been doing. And that is where you arch and flatten as rapidly as possible, and you go aha. And returning to deep, slow, and full Yaha breathing. And Yaha breathing, or first gear, is a form of breath of space, which is the integral component of Gautama Buddha's Anapanasati Yoga, or the yoga of sensitive, nonviolent breathing. This is where you do not control the breath at all, but add awareness and sensitivity to it, and let the breath breathe itself. Sometimes it goes very thin, very silent, very shallow, like it's dissolving into the space that creates it. When breath of space is present, there is a feeling that is part of the gesture of consciousness. No clinging and no resistance. Being present and flowing with events and not getting stuck anywhere. Space creates room for everything to happen. It does not restrict anything. It does not cling to anything. It is like a mirror in that sense. And if you'll notice, when I'm describing breath of space, I'm also describing the basic nature of consciousness, or Buddha nature. That it has the quality of being not stuck anywhere, not entangled, not caught in a chain reaction, and therefore beyond suffering. Breath of space is also the integrator. So when you move between breath of air and breath of space, when you flow into breath of fire, then it becomes part of breath of space. You could say there is space enough to energize yourself with breath of fire. So I'd like you to do it again and notice the changes that occur from even a little bit of breath of fire. And returning to first gear, deep, slow, and full Yaha breathing. And feeling all sensations as energy. Energy created by breath of fire, or brought into awareness by breath of fire. And again, the basic environment of all the four elemental breaths is breath of space. In terms of the five Buddha mandala, breath of space is in the center of the mandala, with the other four elements at the four compass points. And what that means is that the four elemental breaths are integrated when they express breath of space, which means that when breath of fire is in balance, it means that there's no element of forcing yourself to do breath of fire. It's breath of space becoming breath of fire. And through this, our presence in the body allows us to do our movement and do everything we need to do. You could say that breath of fire is the animating energy of our journey. However, that is not exactly accurate either, because all the breaths are interdependent with each other, like the 5 skandhas of consciousness, thought, emotion, sensation, and body. They're constantly interacting with each other. So too do the 5 elemental breaths. There's a little bit of fire inside of space, also water, air, and earth. They're inside of breath of space always. And so the fire aspect of breath of space links with breath of fire, and in a sense tames it by integrating into its field. Same with the other 3. Also, this is the reason why I have taught to never do an activity to the point of strain. Strain appears when strain is present. That means that breath of space and breath of fire are moving out of balance with each other. And the best thing to do is to release the straining and return back into breath of space until you become renewed, and then go back into breath of fire again. This cyclical breathing is part of how the Dumo Yoga of Tibet functions. That's why there are 2 breaths at the heart of that system rather than just one. You cycle between the 2 and you go farther than if you just try to do one as long as you can. Eventually the strain appears, and eventually the strain cannot be carried, and one lets go of the strain and relaxes back into breath of space. In other words, that eventually even the super efforts of some of the Gurdjieff groups eventually lets go of the effort. But we are choosing to be more sensitive with the process, and when strain appears, we let it go as soon as we notice we're straining, and return back, renew ourselves, and then go back into breath of fire, or whatever the task is at hand. And we can therefore sustain the breath of fire indefinitely this way. Doing another round of breath of fire. Going back to first gear, deep, slow, and full Yaha breathing, or breath of space. feeling all sensations as energy within the emerging light body. Continuing to breathe. And doing one more round of breath of fire. And returning to first gear, breath of space, Yaha breathing. Feeling all sensations as energy within the emerging light body. Next, I'd like to focus on breath of water. The breath of water has the aspects of this. It is first fluid in the sense that there's no pause or abrupt change. There's a sense of the inhale and exhale flowing into each other with a deep continuity. It is sometimes also called continuous breathing or circular breathing, because it feels like the energy is moving in a gentle circle, always renewing itself through its cycles. And before we go into the other aspects of breath of water, we'd like to focus the breathing on this one, to feel the place where the inhale turns into the exhale and vice versa. And just concentrate on it being a smooth transition that is fluidly moving between inhale and exhale without a pause, without interruption. And do this for about 20 breaths. And this is the quality of the second gear, what we're doing. It has a kind of rhythm. And returning back to first gear, deep, slow, and full Yaha breathing. Notice what happens when you emphasize awareness of the smoothness of the transition between inhale and exhale. Notice the feeling of continuity, and notice how it is literally harder to get stuck anywhere when you do this. Inside of every stuck place is a subtle pause or hesitation that is restricting the pranic flow of the breath. And so breath of water is the element to invoke in our breathing when we are feeling stuck somewhere. And what you do is you, on an awareness level, you notice how everything is changing, even when it seems to be stuck. For instance, if you notice a frozen area of the body, go into breath of water and feel like you're breathing in through the skin into the area that's holding the tension. And keep doing that. Keep seeing the energy go through the tense area into the heart, through the part of the skin closest to the tight area. And to feel what it would be like to be accepted as you are without needing to change what you are to get approval. And one of the principles that is there in some of your sutras is that you want to treat others as you want to be treated. And so you want to take your own emotions and breathe them in, embrace them, and let them change of their own accord from within themselves. Notice the subtle changes that occur in your body, and have a sense of acceptance of whatever is arising. If you're sad, accept that you're sad, embrace it, breathe into it, feel that inside your breath, your sadness. If someone else is sad, embrace their sadness as well. Feel like you're breathing it in. And also notice how the sadness itself is changing moment to moment. Notice that the area is relaxing around the frozen area of the body. is slowly melting. Notice any sensations. The pain may actually even intensify as you cease to resist it. And then once it's fully not resist, it will start to relax and dissolve. And like water, water tends to flow downwards towards the ocean. That it keeps going lower and lower, being gently pulled by gravity. This represents how we're naturally drawn to the afflicted areas of ourselves, and see that as a moment of healing. The next quality of breath of water is that you intentionally draw in the air during the inhale. You draw in, go, and then you relax the air out on the exhale. So every exhale is a relaxation and letting go. And every inhale is a renewal. Our energy gets renewed, just the same way as the rain comes down on the plants and renews them, nourishes them even, allows them to form their carbohydrate bonds in fusion with the sunlight. So the quality of no pauses, a sense of flowing between inhale and exhale smoothly, and inhale receiving, exhale letting go, and no forcing at all in the exhale, so that every exhale is a relaxation. And again, when it comes to the tensions of the body, the quality of water will relax and massage everything into peace. So I'd like you to do this second gear breathing with this quality in mind for about 20 breaths. And returning back to first gear, breath of space. Would like for you to notice the quality similarity between breath of space and breath of water. Because there is a deep relaxation in the exhale of breath of water, and the breath of space is no control of the breath, and therefore every exhale is not forced. There's a similar quality to each exhale, and both breath of space and breath of water deeply relax oneself. And breath of space is even more relaxing in the sense that there's no even subtle effort to inhale in breath of space. The inhale inhales itself in breath of space. Whereas in breath of water, sometimes when there's a heavy sadness in the heart, one intentionally breathes energy into the chest. And this is, in a sense, feeding the grief so it can complete itself. You're giving energy to the grieving so that the heart can grieve and let go, relax then. And therefore, when you inhale, you expand the belly, you expand the rib cage. And another 20 cycles of breath on the exhale. And then to move into breath of earth. In breath of earth, there is a quality of holding, which is very different from the fluid quality of water. In breath of earth, you concentrate on the container that holds the breath, which is the rib cage, that holds your diaphragm and your lungs. And what I'd like for you to do is to take as deep and full an inhale as possible. And one way of learning this is to do it in 4 parts. Feel the diaphragm and both the right and left side of the diaphragm expand into the belly, and feel your diaphragm go down into your belly. And as you push the belly out, you make room for the diaphragm to go down. And expand the belly as much as possible. And by lifting up and arching the belly, you get the most air into that lower third of your lungs. And then feel like you're pushing the chest upwards towards the ceiling. And fill up the middle third of your lungs, the 2 compartments to the right and left of the sternum. And then the last third is divided up into the right and left side, is the 2 areas below the shoulders. And they fill up by lifting them slightly towards the ears. And then you feel like you're pushing towards the sides of your rib cage and towards the back. And hold. And then exhale. And then to fill it again. all 6 compartments, pushing out on all sides of the rib cage, scanning awareness to doing that. In terms of your yogic systems in your world, the breath retentions of Hatha Yoga are breaths of earth. They're also considered a remedial breath as well, because it's designed to help you increase your lungs to full capacity, which is necessary in the journey into light body to fully utilize the entire surface of your lungs for breathing. Is part of it. You become a more efficient generator of energy, which is important for the movement into light body. Also, breath of earth is grounding. Grounding is a result of holding our emotions, forming a container to feel everything we're feeling, and grounding the feeling so we're not overwhelmed by them. So if you're feeling very strong, powerful emotions that feel overwhelming to you, do breath of earth. And what I like to modify in the instructions of your world is that very often in the breath retentions of your yogic paths is you do counts. You count for the amount of time you do the holdings, making your inhale as long as 8 counts and your retention as long as 16, and your exhale as slow as 8 counts as well. Sometimes the counts are useful as a way of extending your ability to hold. However, I recommend that it's never done to the point of strain. When you find yourself straining to do the count, that is a time to exhale. And if you follow that sensitivity, breath of space will integrate the breath retentions more quickly, because breath of space never has strain with it. And it's the breath of space becoming breath of earth that integrates that, so that eventually you move to what you might call 4-element breathing, which is coming for all of you. 4-element breathing is when breath of space simultaneously becomes linked with all the breath pranas simultaneously and breathes them all, so that you're energizing and relaxing and grounding and inspiring. I would like for you to do 10 breaths of earth. And returning to first gear, deep, slow, and full Yaha breathing, breath of space. You'll notice that breath of earth has something in common with breath of water, in the sense that there is an intentional inhale that draws energy into the lungs, except it's a deeper, wider inhale that takes in more energy and expands to full capacity, because the holding aspect of the breath is emphasized. And the difference between breath of earth and breath of water is the pauses become significant, whereas in breath of earth, a breath of water, there's no pauses. Breath of earth, the pause is the breath. The holding of the air in its fullness is the container of the earth. And it's done by the earth matter of the body. The earth holds the air inside of it. So it emphasizes the container that is the body. And also the exhale is softer and even slower than the breath of water, which has a quality of relaxation. And the slowness of the exhale in breath of earth comes from having so fully expanded the lungs that it takes a little longer for the exhale to fully relax out the air, because there's so much air to relax out. You will notice that in the way I'm describing the breaths, they have a lot in common with each other, because they're really different phases of four-element breathing. We're emphasizing each of the elements as we breathe. In a way, each of the breaths contains the other ones, because each of the breaths is breath of space, which contains everything. And then the last breath is breath of air, which is the fourth gear, which is where you breathe in 4-to-1 ratio. Breathe as rapidly as you can. And breath of air is something like breath of fire in the sense that the exhale is aggressive. Breath of air has both the inhale and exhale be aggressive. And there's no pauses between the inhale and exhale, but there's also not really a smooth continuity either. It is like a rapid switching instead. The breath of air is also has some qualities of breath of space, in the sense that because of its aggression, it's also not controlled. It is paradoxically the control that leads to the release of control. And it's like the movement towards orgasm in sexual union, in a sense that the activity is brought to a crescendo, a peak of effort, so that you go into non-effort. So if you have trouble letting go, breath of air is the one to do. That way you take your control and channel it into like an aggressive, intense, deep controlling of your breathing. Aggressive in both the inhale and the exhale. And you bring it to a peak of effort where it's easy to let go. So the secret of surrender is really in breath of air. And the surrender is the movement of orgasm, where the tension reaches its maximum and then you let go. And this is the one where a little straining is okay, because it is breath of space integrating the feeling of straining itself. You will know when the straining is too much, though, because in a way you're straining the strain, and that's where you let go. Moving into fourth gear breath of air. And returning to first gear, deep, slow, and full Yaha breathing. Breath of space. You will notice that breath of air is never for a long time. It can be lengthened considerably, but as the Taoists have in their sacred writings, a strong wind does not last forever. This level of intensity is not meant to be sustained. It's meant to reach a peak. At the peak, you let go. It is a place where you can switch from efforting to surrendering. And it makes sense at the peak what that means. Because there's a certain point where you know you cannot sustain the peak energy for very long. And so the very movement to the peak gives the wisdom of letting go a direct experiential sensation. And there is like a gentle explosion as the energy implodes on itself and shifts into another gear. It's a good exhaustion that occurs, and the exhaustion does not take a lot of time because the peak has been attained. And you'll notice that, like breath of fire, that aggression generates a lot of energy. Even more so than breath of fire. So breath of air has a fire element within it, just as fire has an air element within it. And just as in nature, fire needs air to sustain itself. But if the wind is too strong, it blows out the fire. There is an exact speed that creates the maximum generation of energy. And that is what you find when you move to your peak. You'll feel the energy building up. And even though breath of air seems a little more chaotic than the others, everything has an intrinsic order to it. And the order is based on moving in energy to its peak. And notice how, having cycled through the four elements, breath of space is now fuller and deeper. And notice how even the body feels different after having gone through the breaths. Even though the focus of this transmission has been more instructional Notice the changes that have occurred anyway from having moved through and practiced these breaths. End of transmission. Always a joy to be present with all of you. Te Mava Namaste.